Hi everyone, welcome to After Class.
A podcast by two passionate adult ballerinas about all things adult ballet related.
And some random thoughts in between.
We're so glad you're here.
So grab your water bottle
or a cup of coffee
and join us for a quick chat after class.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of After Class. Today we're going to be talking about ballet terminology and some of the essential terms that will really help you understand what is being said in class and what the teacher is expecting when they use certain words. Obviously, ballet is in French, so for those of us who don't speak French, it can be a little bit challenging. So we hope that this episode can help you guys as you're navigating class. Hello, Yelena.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Hannah. So this is an episode that we really want everyone to take the best out of it because I understand how hard it is to be as an adult in a studio. And on top of that, you hear a very, very foreign language and you're like, what? And on top of that, all the steps look really different and weird, nothing to do with daily movements. So we trying to help you to create a way for you to differentiate. If my teacher says this, my body, my limbs, or whatever that we're going to do, are going to move in this direction.
Yeah, and I think just so everyone kind of knows up front, this isn't necessarily us giving you an exhaustive list of every word in ballet because that would take forever. This is more so focusing on the terms that you will hear over and over again that are often descriptors of a lot of different movements. So we're not going to go A to Z, plie, tendu, like through a whole class. These are just the words that I would say I think these are the terms that kind of start differentiating you from like a very beginner dancer to someone who's a little bit more experienced when you start understanding how these terms function within ballet.
To begin with, let's talk about devant, à la seconde, and derrière. Not my best French pronunciation, although I studied it for 10 years. I can only say, bonjour, ça va? Je m'appelle Jelena, and that's it. Devant, it means in front of you. So, your teacher can say, but Mountain Dew devant. Or your teacher can do right arm devant. Everything is referring to a position in front of you. Your arm in front of you, your torso is going to bend forward in front of you, or your leg is going to open forward in front of you. À la seconde is by your side, everything. So we can do, okay, badminton do à la seconde. Arm à la seconde. Everything that your teacher just said using à la seconde is by your side. And then at this point, you might already guess that derrière is going to be behind you. Yeah? Devant, à la seconde, and derrière.
Yeah, I think those are so helpful to know. I would even say some of these terms, if you spend some time like actively trying to memorize, it will really take some of the stress out of class, especially if you're a beginner, because I know that that can be part of the feeling of overwhelm as a beginner when you're in the studio setting or in a live class is on top of all the other things going on. You're also trying to remember what these words mean. And so I think having them memorize can be really helpful in those moments for alleviating some of the stress of being in a live class. So, but like Yelena said, those three are ones that you will definitely hear all throughout class to refer to all kinds of different things. But it's really helpful to know that devant will always mean in the front, to the front, derrière will always mean behind, and à la seconde will always mean to the side. Like if you can remember that, it will really, really help you in class.
Definitely. Like, at least you won't be lost when it starts with piqués, jetés, fondus, grommelman, développé, and you're like, what? Well, at least I know that it's forward to the side and to the back.
Hi friends, just wanted to remind you that thebusybunhead.com is now live, so make sure you head over and check that out. It is a hub for all things adult ballet. Right now we have published a list of all the adult ballet intensives happening in 2025, so make sure you go check out the website and find your next adult ballet intensive.
Then we have something that we don't have in our notes, but we have ancra. Ancra means cross in French. So that means that your leg, whatever you're doing, the movement that you're doing, you're going to do it on forward, side, back, and side again, because you need to do that motion of a cross.
You will hear en croix a lot at the bar because you're standing leg that's closest to the bar will be, for the most part, not moving, but your outside leg will be doing most things en croix. So you'll hear that term, especially at the bar for things like tendu exercises and stuff like that. So a lot of times too, I think one of the hard things can be when you're first starting to take class is a lot of times the teacher won't even mark something if it's en croix. They'll show it just devant and then they'll say en croix. And so if you don't know what that means and you just see the teacher, showing you the tendus to the front and then they say en croix and the whole class is just like, okay. And you're like, what the heck does that mean? It means do the exact same thing that she just marked to the front, but do it front, side, back,
inside. So much true. It's so much true. I forgot that we do that. So now we are going a little bit more, again, a little bit difficult, but yet you're going to use it and you're going to hear it all the time, constantly in classes. Therefore, it should be easier for you to remember, memorize, and get used to it. So we have what is called on the oars and on the down. So I saw this video on the internet, which I found it really useful. And the oars, it means outwards, and on the down means inwards. Now, how can you do that in a way that you can remember? Imagine if you are, so put your hands on your chest and just do the motion of going outwards all the way to your back, right? So again, open your arms in front of you, extend and keep rotating all the way out. Any movement that you do with your body, or mostly with your legs, but any movement that you do with your legs that are doing those kind of motions. So let's say you are in first position and you begin from the center of your body outwards, that is doing an on the oars movement. Now, if you're coming from the back, so you're coming from behind, yeah, so no, it's not gonna always kind of come from the back. You're gonna start as well from the side and then moving forward. But if you're coming from outside towards the center of your body, so imagine that you're closing a movement towards the center of your body, that would be then inwards and that would be on the down. I found that video a little bit useful because I keep always saying outwards, inwards, open the door, close the door. But to me, that made most sense. What about you, Hannah? How do you relate the on the oars versus on the down?
Well, I remember when I was little that our teacher taught us to remember, she would say on or out the door. So that's always how I remembered on or was that it was outward. And then obviously on was the opposite. So that's one of those little rhymes that kind of just stuck with me. But I also think too, not to confuse things, but you actually said something in class when I first started training with you that I found very helpful, especially when it comes to turning, because it is on oars outward, on don's inward, but you also explained what your heel is doing of your standing leg and how when you're doing a turn that is on dehors, like if you're doing a pirouette, if your teacher says pirouette on dehors, that means that your standing leg, the heel of your standing leg is going to be moving back. And if you're doing an on to don turn, the heel of your standing leg is going to be moving forward. So that has also helped me because I do think, and of course, right now as we're talking about it, I can't think of exact examples, but there are times when just thinking of outward and inward doesn't always help, or it doesn't give you a full explanation of what you should be doing. And so when it comes to turning movements, I think knowing that anything on dehors, your heel is moving back, and anything on don, your heel is moving forward, is also a really helpful thing. Like, I think that one really helped me specifically with doing rond de jambe en tournant.
That's right.
The heel is which direction the heel is moving. So if that's too much for this discussion, feel free to discard it. But if that is helpful for you.
We actually need to talk about the alternate terminology later on. We can mention what that means. But as you can see, Hannah already said two different terminologies together. Rond de jambe on the oars, alternate, or rond de jambe on the oars, on the down. Alternate on the down, sorry. Yeah, so we're gonna talk about that later.
Yeah, and I think that's, like you said, that's the perfect example of how these terms get combined to describe different movements. And that's why putting in that extra effort, I think, to memorize what some of these things mean is so helpful. Like, that's a perfect example. So another one that I think would be really helpful to talk about is en l'air and à terre. So maybe you can talk about that for people.
Yeah, so everything that is going to be done en l'air, it means in the air. So every time your teacher says whatever expression that she uses and she says en l'air, that means that your leg is going to move off the ground in whatever direction that she mentioned. So en l'air is in the air. Now, depending the step, is going to have a different height. Might be 25, 45, 90. So that all depends on your, your flexibility as well, the step that the teacher is doing. And parterre is your toes are going to be in full contact with the floor constantly. So that's parterre. En l'air, in the air, parterre, on earth, so on the ground. Your toes in fully contact with the floor.
Yeah, that's a handy one. And I think those are probably, like you said, two of the easier ones. But again, they can be used to describe multiple different movements. It's kind of like a cue for your brain of what's coming. If you hear whatever the step is described as en l'air, you can automatically know that that means your foot's going to be off the ground versus à terre, parterre on the ground. So that's another helpful one. Another one that I think is worth mentioning, because you will hear it used in class and you might not immediately recognize the difference between the two terms, is élevé and relevé. So the way I was taught is that a relevé is a rise that begins from a plie, whereas an élevé is a rise that begins from a straight leg. So is that the same for you, Yelena, that relevé begins on a plie, élevé begins on a straight leg?
I was never taught that difference. So again, that tells you how different ballet schools can be all around the world.
Yeah, and if you're confused too because of different teachers' methodologies, you can always just ask, like, are you wanting this from a plie or not? Do you know, because I know you obviously grew up doing Cuban methodology, but do you remember what you were taught for RAD? Because I grew up in an RAD school, and I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Okay, so RAD is they use both élevé and relevé, and I think Cicchetti also is both.
Yeah,
I'm not
if
sure
I'm
about
not wrong,
this.
yes, Cicchetti, I'm teaching Cicchetti at the moment. Well, we were teaching Cicchetti and I changed to the Australian methodology at the moment. But yeah, Cicchetti, I think they also use both. Let's talk about something else that you're going to hear a lot, which is demi and grand. Demi, it's half or small. That would be demi. And grand would be big or full. How do we explain that? Demi plie, the biggest, best example ever. It's a small flexion of your legs or half flexion of the legs. And that's demi-plie. Grand plie will be big flexion of the legs or a full flexion of your legs. So you're going to be from standing legs all the way down to almost rising your heels. Like, you actually need to rise your heels a little bit off the ground to do your grand plies in most of the positions. So that will be the best expression. Demi and grand. And then you will see it in a battement tendu. It's parterre, and then you will see grand battement. It's the leg all the way en l'air in the air, as grand and big as you can.
I think another one too you can kind of throw in the same category is petite, because I know, like, for battement there can be grand battement and there can also be petite battement, which is you're still beating, because battement means to beat. So petite is very small little beats, and so there's usually little beats at the ankle, whereas a grand battement, like you said, would be a big kick. So I think can do petite, demi, and grand are all descriptors of size when it comes to steps. I think that's probably the best way to describe them, is that they're size descriptors for how big or small the movement is going to be.
Yep. So now we have entourage is just anything that refers to turning. That's it. Anytime you hear entourage related to any step, you have to know that you're going to turn. Because if I said badminton du, entourage in my class, badminton du is that movement of the extension of the leg, either devant, à la seconde, or derrière, right? But if we add to tendu and entourage, your supporting leg is going to be moving as you execute that badminton du. Anything that has entourage in the description is always going to be turning, and your teacher also need to specify whether it's going to be badminton du on the horse Antonan on the or, so Antonan on the down. So you know if you're pushing your heel back or if you're pushing your heel forward.
Yeah, that one's so helpful to know. I think
It
that's another
is.
one that, like, it unlocks a lot of things when you just know that entonnote means that the move is going to be turning, that there's going to be
Yeah.
turning involved. It's really, really helpful. Another one that's very similar in that way, I think, is piqué, because it's another one that is used to describe a lot of different movements. You can do piqué arabesque, you can do piqué turns.
Piqué, use it as unless it's done at the bar and your teacher said je te piqué. What she meant is you jeté in the air and then you prick on the floor, but it doesn't mean that you're transferring your weight. But piqué as per se, it means to prick, yes, but it also means that you're going to transfer and you're going to move within the space. And you can do a piqué to the fifth, exactly as Hannah said, piqué to arabesque. You can do a tombe piqué to nan. That will means the lamb duck movement because you did a tombe and you piqué to pirouette onto nan.
And probably the biggest thing to keep in mind with piqué that's consistent is that when you are transferring the weight, you're transferring it onto a straight leg. So any sort of piqué step or doing a piqué turn, as you are pointing the leg and the foot and extending it in whatever direction you've been asked to, as you transfer your weight onto that leg, the leg is straight. So that's the consistent factor, I think, across all piqué movements.
I know, that's true. And as a proud teacher, I'm like, oh, I'm so proud of you, Hannah. I'm so glad that we always have you in this podcast. Like having you, yeah, it's true. It makes sense. I'm like, oh, shoot, that's right. I forgot to say that. Every time you piqué overextend leg. So you're gonna end up with that extend leg. That's what makes the difference between chasses, piqués, or tombes. Yeah.
I think too, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but another consistent thing with whatever you're doing with it, whether it's an arabesque, a turn, or even a piqué jeté, like you said, which is a common exercise at the bar where you kind of just do the little tap tap on the floor. One of the common things is that there is accent, and it's like a sharp, quick movement. So if you're doing a piqué arabesque, you really want to step onto that supporting leg with an accent versus just kind of slowly. Like, I know, especially on point, that's one of the things that you've corrected me on, is not slowly stepping onto a piqué arabesque, but it's like a sharp movement.
Yeah. And it's so much harder to do it slow. I would challenge anyone and tell me which one is easier or harder. Like my students, they're like, oh, that's so much easier. I'm like, trust me when I'm saying hips forward, pique and one. Don't pique and 1, 2. No, as soon as you do clear, you just go pique and stay. Hold it for a second, and then if you want, release. That makes so much difference to every movement. And that's right, it has dynamic accent. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to. It's one of those steps you have to commit to. You just got to go for it,
Definitely.
which is just extra scary when you're doing it on point, but it does help. It is easier in a weird way. It doesn't seem like it would be easier to do it fast, but it is.
It is. It is. It makes so much sense. So now, the last few terminologies that we have here, or terms, how would you say, Hannah, tendus, dégagé? How do you find those difference between one and the other?
Yeah, so tendu and dégagé, again, if you were to just kind of look around the room when this is happening, you might think that looks basically the same to me. But the biggest differentiator is just that tendu stays on the ground and dégagés come up off the floor. So not very high off the floor. I think, what, about 20 degrees, you would say, off the floor. So you keep it fairly low, but you do lose contact with the ground.
Dégagés to me meant nothing until a few years ago. So tendu, yes, is by the floor, so fully contact with your toes, fully contacting the ground. Now, dégagé, we call them jetés. And we have a very specific, the Cuban ballet methodology has a very specific degree for that. It's 25 degrees off the ground. So jetés goes pointing your toes, and what makes you separate from the floor is that accent of your toes. So again, jeté, we call them jetés. So we don't call them dégagé. However, the RAD does.
Yeah. Well, as everyone can hear, there is a lot of different terminology, so much to learn, and there's also a lot of differences between schools. So, from my experience, teachers are usually very understanding if you are
Oh, yeah.
asking questions about clarification of terminology, because most teachers, especially of adults, understand that we often are kind of getting our training from a lot of different people, and we have kind of a mixed bag of exposure to different schools and terminologies and methodologies. And so I have never had a teacher that was not okay with clarifying. If you're wondering, because I've even heard too, not to completely confuse it, but with dégager, jeter, glisser is another one that people use to describe the same thing. So you can literally have 3 different words for what is arguably the same movement. So that definitely is a very real part of ballet training. So if you feel confused ever, know that you have every right to feel confused because it is confusing.
It is confusing, even for me. I've been learning and teaching ballet my entire life, like literally my entire life since I was 7. I'm 34, or going to be 34. I'm still 33, and it's confusing. Like when I go, still the RAD, I need to read the foundation of the classical ballet technique done by them, which is their methodology and terminology book. Because sometimes I'm like, how do I use the retire here? Because for me it would be a passe, but the retire has a different position, back, forward, and side. But for me, passe is the same, back, forward, and side. So I get all like,
Yeah.
so if you are confused, that's normal. Your teacher will for sure clarify a few things. Otherwise, just go with the process, enjoy. And you will see one day you're gonna wake up and you're like, oh my God, I didn't know how to do rom the yam and the or spot there. Whatever and antonym. And you're gonna get it all. Like it just clicks one day. That's what I love about ballet.
Yeah, and it is nice because it does start to make sense. Like, you start to see the connections and the patterns that emerge with terminology the longer you do it. And like I said at the beginning, I think if you're willing to just put in that little bit of extra time to doing some study outside the classroom of terms and like watching YouTube videos,
Yeah.
it can really, really help you in class to feel less overwhelmed. So definitely recommend that. But we hope this episode was helpful for you guys. I hope that we didn't just make you feel more overwhelmed. That was not the goal.
We're gonna receive a message saying, thank you, but now I'm even more confused than before.
I know it's a lot, but also at the end of the day, like it's not that serious, it's just ballet. So always keep that in mind when you're starting to feel a little overwhelmed. I have to tell myself that sometimes too. It's just ballet. But yeah, hopefully this was overall helpful. And if you guys would like more of this type of content in the future, feel free to let us know, kind of going into more of technique, terminology. And as Yelena mentioned, we will also include a free PDF that you guys can download with these terms and with the definitions.
Yep. Thank you so much, everyone, for always joining us. We are super excited after a year of doing this, and we're going to keep it up. Probably for another 10 more years. Who knows?
Thank you guys so much. We will catch you next week on the next episode.
Bye. Thank you for listening to After Class.
Join the community on YouTube and Instagram, or come dance with us, our weekly Zoom classes for adult ballerinas like you.
Links included in the episode description. Special thank you to our sponsors.
See you next time after class. Podcast produced by Mission Bridge Media.